Currently, I am teaching a free community class for adults aged 18 and over at a local branch of the library in Philadelphia. My students range in proficiency from beginner to intermediate. They come from all over the world: Korea, Japan, China, Mexico, just to name a few. Every week, the makeup of my class changes, and since it is community class, you don't need to sign up beforehand, so I don't always know who's coming. This means I have to anticipate my students' needs as spanning from the absolute beginners to intermediates. Because of this, I've decided to focus on how to better teach across these levels in my classroom by differentiating tasks. I found that I've been able to accomplish this through tiering them. I want my students to get the most out of my class, regardless of what level they happen to be when they walk through the door. One strategy that teachers of adults can use to help differentiate materials from multi-level classrooms is to tier activities. What this means is giving a base activity for all students in the classroom to do, but have extra steps or additional activities for early finishers to complete. Teachers can do this by figuring out the core tasks that they want all students to complete, and then determine what subsequent activities that tie back to the main task can be used for early finishers. Ways teachers can indicate tiered activities include saying things like, if you have time, please do X, Y, or Z, or if you finished, please complete this section. Having bored students who always finish their work early because it is too easy for them is never good, because they become disinterested in what's going on in class and mentally check out. By setting more work up for them to do that challenges them and pushes them to think, students end up not only getting more out of the class, but also becoming more engaged. Having students who are more engaged boosts their morale and motivation for language learning. And by making the work not mandatory for all students, lower level learners will not feel bad about themselves for not having completed the additional work that was put forward. Personally, I have used this technique several times in my classroom and have found it to be quite successful. An instance of this was just a few weeks ago when I was teaching my class emotion words. I created a two-sided worksheet with pictures of a man expressing various emotions. On the front, I had more common ones such as happy, sad, and angry, and on the back, I had more advanced ones such as enraged, overwhelmed, and lonely. When I distributed the worksheet to my class, I told them that everyone had to label the emotions on the front, but if they had time, they could also do the back. I did this knowing that if the more advanced students in my class managed to get through all the ones on the front, they would have a bit of a challenge awaiting them on the back. Across the literature, authors have strongly advocated for tiering activities for students in this type of classroom. Carol Ann Tomlinson is quoted in an article that was published by the National Center for the Study of Adult Learning and Literacy as saying that assigning tiered activities that allow learners to work on the same concepts but with varying degrees of complexity and open-endedness is a technique that teachers can and should use in these types of classroom settings. In Jeremy Harmer's book, The Practice of English Language Teaching, he also encourages challenging what he calls the early finishers. He does point out that this is a bit of a balancing act, though, because the extra tasks should be viewed as an appropriate challenge for these students, rather than extra work that they have to do that they would rather not complete. I think part of what scares some people about using differentiation in their classroom is that they are afraid it's going to be a lot more work on their part as the instructor. And while they are correct that it is going to entail a little bit more work than just selecting one worksheet to distribute to the entire class, differentiation can be done in such a way that tasks do not have to be completely overhauled. When doing this, I think it's important to keep in mind what kind of language you want your students to be producing. Just adding extra steps in order for your students to be occupied for a longer period of time doesn't really benefit anyone involved. So as an instructor, it's important to take some time to figure out what sort of language you want to elicit from your students and what you want them to be getting from completing this extra work. In my opinion, both students and teachers really gain from being part of a differentiated classroom. Students are getting the most they possibly can from the materials being presented, and teachers are not flustered trying to figure out what to do with students who are either ahead or behind. I strongly encourage teachers to see how they can implement differentiation in their classroom, including through using tiered activities.